All right, House Republicans are celebrating after they just spent the week trying to push forward President Trump's one big, beautiful bill. But the American people, they're not very confident in the House right now. Obviously, they have a very thin majority. I'm referring to House Republicans here. And it could possibly get a lot thinner as we head into midterms. So Rasmussen Reports just wants to figure out what's going on here. They want to know how bad could it get for House Republicans? And their latest poll, it's got me a little on edge. It says that if the congressional election were held today, 45% of voters would vote for the Democrat candidate, while 44 would vote for the Republican. Now, how is that sized up over the last few midterms? Well, joining me to discuss is our good friend, Mr. Mark Mitchell, head pollster over at Rasmussen Reports. Mark, thank you for being here. I think this poll is interesting because all your polls are interesting, but this one specifically because it happened to come out on the perfect day. Obviously, House Republicans celebrating passing this piece of legislation, but not many Americans are very excited about it because it still doesn't do anything about spending. And Republicans pretend that they want to stop government spending, but it doesn't seem to be the case. So, break down your latest poll and how this measures up on the last few midterm elections.
We are really dialed in on this. We had generic ballot Republicans +3 in November, and that's exactly what it was. Like literally exactly. And then in 2022, we were pretty close too. And I'll tell you what, Republicans were way up because of how horrifying that Joe Biden's early term was. And what tightened it up in 22 was the Dobbs decision, really inflamed a lot of Democrats and got them off the seats. I will say, as a caveat, it's pretty early in the cycle. But Republicans have been up like almost ubiquitously in every poll for the last 3 years. So this is a concern. Again, super early, and it's hard to say. There was a lot of chaos in April and May. It's hard to say exactly why it's down, but I will say this bill's not done yet, and people are paying attention very closely. Um, I think what's going to happen is Trump's going to probably paint it as a win, regardless of what he gets through. And people might be happy because of the tax cuts. I don't know how much of it is about the debt and spending, though. People don't like our runaway government debt, but you also have to acknowledge that the people who've been saying it's unsustainable for the last 30 years have kind of been wrong. Like we have kind of been able to sustain a ridiculous amount of spending. And the real issue is basically jobs and the economy, right? Rising prices, the inflation. So maybe this will create more inflation. That could be a problem. Or maybe the bond market pukes and all of a sudden we have an economic implosion. That could be a problem, but we might come out on the other side of this with everybody jazzed and a juiced consumer economy because of the tax cuts. So it's really hard to predict what's going to happen. But what I can tell you is that right now, these generic results are worse than Donald Trump's numbers are right now. We've had him
Yeah.
basically averaging about +1, +2 for Republicans to be trailing him. Not a good sign. Not sure if when Trump is no longer on the ballot, it is going to convert to Republicans winning elections anymore.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I feel like we've been screaming about this for the last few months now because House Republicans have been just kind of sitting on the sidelines and not codifying the president's agenda. I mean, I spoke with senior, I guess I should just say, House Republican leadership staff about this. And when it comes to codifying, I think he's had over 150 executive orders. I think they only have about 15 of those getting ready to hit the House floor soon. And so it's not nearly as enough as it should be. But that's not surprising, right? Because I believe, politically, the big push there might be, oh, well, we have to win the midterms if we want to codify President Trump's agenda. And they're going to probably try to think that's going to be a way to get
Yeah.
voters out to vote. But I don't think so at all. I think voters have had enough of this and they have fatigue, political fatigue at this point when it comes to this nonsense. And when you see people like Speaker Johnson out there every day touting all of this, I mean, let's be clear Speaker Johnson couldn't get this bill passed in the House by himself. President Trump had to come down to Congress and pitch them and to motivate House Republicans to all get behind this. And that's something that doesn't happen. And so when it comes to Speaker Johnson and whether or not he's able to kind of, let's just say, motivate the base, I don't know if he hasn't. I am getting concerned about the midterms. We also just heard the breakdown on the bill and how one House Republican from the state of New York just decided to sleep through all of this and missed his vote. So again, Republicans doing everything possible to just abandon their base. And I just don't see this going well for them in the midterms. But speaking about falling asleep, Mark, I hope I'm not putting you to sleep, but I know somebody who does, and it's Joe Biden, of course. You guys are polling about Joe Biden's health conditions, and I just baffled by the amount of people in the corporate media world who are pretending like this is breaking news. No one knew what was happening behind the scenes regarding his health. Obviously, Jake Tapper has a book to sell, but you guys just recently polled voters in regards to that. 72% of voters believe it's a serious scandal that the White House staffers were aware of Biden's declining health, mental health conditions, but worked to conceal his condition from the public and members of Congress. Well, I got to say, Mark, they did a pretty crappy job at that because anybody with two eyes and a brain, or at least a functioning couple of brain cells, looked at this man and knew that there was something wrong. So break down this latest poll.
I mean, the big loser here is the mainstream media. They're so detestable. And this all started, the reason we're talking about it is because Jake Tapper decided he was going to write a book about it after this ridiculous cover up that he was part of. They were all part of it. And I love to see Mark Halperin pat himself on the back because he started talking about this in February of 24. But we were polling on it in February of 22, and Americans, by overwhelming majorities, already thought that he had apparent mental decline. 68% of US likely voters in February of 22 said that Joe Biden's mental decline has been apparent. 66% wanted him to take a mental test. And we polled on it many times. Everybody said overwhelmingly he was too old to be president, including like 30 or 40% of Democrats. And so the absolute hubris to ignore the public opinion and then run this guy and then try to make up for it by covering it a year too late, it is absolutely stunning. And there's, multiple questions. Nobody believes the mainstream narrative on this. How likely is it that major media journalists were aware of Joe Biden's declining mental condition but chose to help cover it up? 63%, only 27% say not likely, only 10% not at all likely. And by a plurality, people think that he was already mentally cooked going into his term. 44% said he was already going downhill before 2020. Only 41% say, oh no, it started after he got into office. So this is just one more thing where they've completely destroyed their credibility. It's why Americans don't literally trust anything. And we have polling back too that isn't public yet, but we polled on the cancer thing. And I can tell you right now, nobody believes the official story at all. 63% think it's likely he already had cancer going into the term. It's like, obviously, only 21% say not likely. So we're getting a 3-to-1 margin practically among US likely voters. And so, again, this is the media that's going to be shilling for the establishment, shilling for the Democrats, and they're going to lose their power. Their credibility is completely gone.
Yeah, well, I mean, the rest of us on the independent world of all of this are going to be on the receiving end of that and the beneficiaries of that because they've lost all their credibility. And I know people like you, Mark, and everyone over at Rasmussen. I mean, we constantly are going through your polls. Your polls are accurate. Everyone else is full of garbage, and that's just the reality of it. Is the American people see through it? They see that your accuracy rate is way over the target, and they see all these other pollsters how biased they are and how they're inserting their bias into it, and so they're not going to be writing it out with them. And it's just outrageous that all of these journalists are Jake Tapper, now that he has a book to sell, is coming out here and saying, "Oh, I can't believe there was a cover up." There's enough evidence, and Megyn Kelly destroyed him on this, and thankfully she did. There's
Yeah.
enough evidence that he was well versed on everything that was going on behind the scenes, but lied to the American people. And I just think at this point, all of these people who sat here and lied, the MSNBC talking heads, CNN, they should just be kicked off air. You have zero credibility because this man was never competent, shouldn't have been in the White House in the first place. And it's very obvious that those close to him were taking advantage of everything. You know, we're learning more. And we just spoke with Ed Martin over at the weaponization DOJ section of all this, who's doing the diving. He's the director now.
Yes.
But he's investigating the auto pen thing. And it looks like people close to Joe Biden were getting possibly paid off to use the auto pen on a lot of controversial pardons. So it's not really surprising, of course. It's very, very likely this was taking place because it's the only valid explanation for any of this. Mark, real quick, where do you see the media going after this? Do you think this is going to be the final death blow for all those corporate media talking heads?
Yeah, I hope, but we have to see where the leftist cult is going to migrate to. I mean, already they're completely destroyed. Listen, conservatives don't love Fox News, but Fox News is doing primetime nights at like 2.5 million viewers. If you combine CNN and MSNBC, you get to less than half of that. So it's been an incredible implosion. I think Biden actually benefited a lot from in kind contributions from MSNBC and CNN during the 2020 cycle. MSNBC had 2.5 million viewers back then, too. And it's like basically all these normies plugged into the Democrat matrix and have woken up and gone away. And you're left with this core of people who are still worshiping MSNBC every night. And they're hiding, I think, in places like Blue Sky and Substack and Reddit. And they're not moderating. I can tell you that. And you can see man on the street interviews. There's a lot of like mental damage that's been perpetrated on these people, and they have to wake up and heal. And some of them are going to. It's just a question of how much. But then you still have the Democrats overwhelming electioneering ability, their ability to launder all this money into campaigns, and a whole lot of normies that just love that Democrat brand advantage. So it's almost impossible to predict where this is going to go. But, a lot of people are being super accelerationist right now. And, the energy on the right is totally different too. I mean, people are loving Trump's new tone, in my opinion, and you can see it all over Twitter. And so it's kind of like, an immovable force and an unstoppable, the trope, right? We'll have to see where this goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people are excited for his second term. We saw what was wrong in the first term and the people who weren't loyalists or the people who wouldn't carry out his agenda. And I think we're quicker or we're more on our feet now to make sure that those who are toxic to his agenda are going to hit the sides pretty quick because we've had enough of this. It is time. We are ready for change. And President Trump's working overtime, so the people around him should be doing the same. Mark Mitchell, as always, thank you for bringing us these incredible polls. We greatly appreciate your time. Every single morning, I wake up at 4 a.m. because I don't want you to have to do that. I want to find the news stories that you need to know to start your day every single day. So if you want the news the corporate media is not going to tell you about, you got to head on over to my podcasting platforms and make sure you're following. We are on every single platform that you could possibly imagine: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the big ones, of course. Look up The Breanna Morello Show if you haven't done so already. Make sure you give us a follow. That's The Breanna Morello Show. And let's just say you got your hands full and you can't really figure this out right now. I've got it for you. It's very, very simple. If you head over to the independentnewsroom.com, we've got a little tab that says The Breanna Morello Show. Click that and it'll bring you to all of our show pages. Again, folks, independentnewsroom.com, and give us a search, The Breanna Morello Show.